is this just feels like an old style kind of like colonialist conquest where like all the European powers kind of sit up and just kind of carve up Africa and like screw local tribal ties and family ties, the local economy. Just let me take this knife and I'll make a square here, and now this is, I don't know, Angola, who cares? I wanted to talk about this because this just shows how little the Russians care about Ukraine and how little they care about coming off as a legitimate force. Because they don't care. They never have. But this is one of the more obvious examples of them not caring. Anyway, the reason why this pissed me off so much, let me read this to you guys. Kremlin says Russia will consult with local populations of 2 Ukrainian regions that Moscow annexed last week to determine the exact borders of the regions to be integrated into Russia. They're of course talking about Donetsk and Zaporozhye. I think there is audio of Dmitry Peskov actually saying this. He is the press secretary of Vladimir Putin. Let's play the clip. He has a bushy mustache. Let me turn it down. Partial clarification has already come. I'll tell you in less legal language. LNR and DNR within the borders of 2014. Kherson is Zaporozhye. We will continue to consult with the population regarding the borders of these regions. Okay, sorry, it was Kherson and Zaporozhye. I got it confused. This is unequivocal answer. We will continue to consult with people who live in these areas. Okay, so what gets me about this this news of them not knowing the borders of what they just annexed is this just feels like an old style kind of like colonialist conquest where like all the European powers kind of sit up and just kind of carve up Africa and like screw local tribal ties and family ties, the local economy. Just let me take this knife and I'll make a square here, and now this is, I don't know, Angola, who cares? Oh, it's Congo now, or whatever we're gonna call it. It takes that approach to Ukraine, which is already bad. But the thing that gets me about this is, think about this in terms of the referendum, quote unquote, that they had recently. Think about it. So already in the referendum, quote unquote, it was done last second with 3 days preparation after, for example, in Kherson being canceled a month earlier due to the Kherson counteroffensive making it too dangerous to conduct. Then they do it with only 3 days prep, with only 3 days announcement to the public because of how disastrous the Russians were in Kharkiv. They got their backs blown out. It was terrible for them, great for us, right? So they only do 3 days prep, very little advertisement. And for that reason, not a lot of people turned out. So there wasn't a lot of participation. So there was very little prep and not a lot of participation. No people who were displaced by the war got to participate. Nobody in Ukrainian-controlled Donetsk, Ukrainian-controlled Kherson, Ukrainian-controlled Zaporozhye, nobody in Ukrainian-controlled territory got to participate in the vote. And now, and we also know that there was widespread fraud, with many examples on film of people who were voting basically not only being forced to do it at gunpoint by local soldiers, but then literally just asking the person conducting the voting, you know, the person, the poll workers, mind you, what option do I click? Just tell me what to click so I can leave. As we see on film, people just stuffing unanswered ballots, like ballots that don't even have a mark on it, into the ballot box just to make it look like a lot of people voted, and so they could stuff ballots on camera so they can make it look like, oh, look at all these people who voted. Well, they are clearly not marked. This was clearly a sham, just like in 2014. But on top of all of that, we now have an admission by the Russian government that they conducted a referendum without even knowing what territory would be included in the referendum. How do you conduct a referendum without knowing what the borders of the voting population is? This would be like saying, oh, I'm running for House Seat 5 in Minnesota. Oh, where's House Seat 5? I don't know, we'll figure it out afterwards. Like later, like if Are you in the area? Sure, you can vote. How do you conduct a vote of any sort if you don't even know what the borders of who's voting in the election are? How? Not to mention, not only is that insane when it comes to conducting the vote, because like who gets to be included, but also like that also means that the people who were voting didn't even know exactly what they were voting for, because somebody could have thought they were voting for all of Zaporozhye to be a part of Russia, when actually they were voting for only like half of it to be a part of Russia, since Russia only controls like half of it and doesn't control the city of Zaporozhye, which is the crown jewel of what the Russians want. They want to capture Zaporozhye as one of the crown jewels of Ukraine, of Russian imperial interests in Ukraine. So that means now, if we were to tally up all the problems with this referendum, it was prepared last second. It was conducted under dangerous circumstances. Nobody displaced got to vote. Nobody in Ukrainian-controlled territory got to vote. They don't know the borders of who was supposed to be included in a referendum vote and the borders of what is supposed to be annexed by the Russian Federation. They don't even know that yet. So who's to be included, period? And the people who voted didn't get all the information because they didn't even know what they were voting for, because the Russians didn't even know what the fuck they were voting for. And on top of all of that, it was also very clearly rigged. Russian democracy, isn't it beautiful? My God, man, my God. What a strange set of circumstances. Why would they even admit this? This is embarrassing. Also, I do want to bring up the fact, this is a really good graphic that I hadn't seen until recently. And this is a great time to bring it up, considering we're talking about the occupied territories. In the occupied territories, a lot of democratically elected leaders, like the mayor of Mariupol, the mayor of Metiopol, the mayor of the city of Kherson, the mayor of many different locations, many local officials, governors, stuff like that, were replaced. That the Russian government arrested the local democratically elected leaders who were democratically elected to lead their local government. They arrested those people and then replaced them with Russian inserts, with Russian politicians or with Russian officials. Sometimes these are just Russians who have been involved in the invasion. Other times they're literal FSB agents, like Igor Girkin, who was the Ministry of Defense for the Donetsk People's Republic. But I wanted to bring up this graphic because some people make the argument that this is what the locals want. This is what the locals want in Ukraine. The locals in eastern Ukraine want to be part of Russia. That these local occupied governments represent that truth, that they want to be part of Russia. But the problem is, everybody who's governing the Donetsk People's Republic, the Luhansk People's Republic, all of these occupied territories, they're not Ukrainians. They're all citizens of the Russian Federations. They're not people who actually lived in these communities. These are people from Moscow. These are people from St. Petersburg. These are people from Vladivostok. These are not people from Kharkiv. These are not people from Kherson. These are not people from Odessa. These are fucking Russians. And sometimes it's just blatant. It's just fucking FSB agents. Could you imagine if we waltzed into Tijuana, Mexico, took that shit over, said we were liberating it because it's what the locals wanted, then we made a puppet government and filled it with literal CIA agents and made their Ministry of Defense a CIA agent and their leader a CIA agent, none of them being Mexican citizens, all of them being American citizens. And we call that liberation, and that's what the locals want, yet the locals aren't even participating in the government. I mean, a modern version of the history of Texas. Exactly. Yes. You're starting to get it now.